You're listening to Catholic Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for tuning in and listening or watching our show. I understand this is now on YouTube, and so thanks, everybody, for taking some time this morning to join what I hope will be a very interesting and thought-provoking show. This is Bob Gilligan of the Catholic Conference of Illinois, and today, let me just briefly mention, this is WNDZ. AM 750 in Chicago. That's how you can listen to the program. And also, you could watch it on YouTube. And if you go to YouTube, that's youtube.com/Catholic Chicago. So you can watch it or listen to it. And so today's program is being recorded on Friday for airing and viewing on Monday, the 15th of November, I believe it is. So let's do this here before we do anything else. Let me just go over the lineup for this morning. The lineup is this. We'll cover three topics. For people who follow the Catholic Conference and follow the news in general, I think you would know that the General Assembly just concluded what they call its veto session, which is probably a misnomer because generally the thinking is that this gives the opportunity for the legislature to act on vetoes that the governor may have enacted since the legislature met back in the spring, concluding in May. But either the governor didn't veto many things or we decided to go in a different direction. So there were a lot of hot controversial topics that we're going to get into that we were very involved with. We're going to talk about those with our guests here this morning. So that's what basically the subject of today's show is, those topics that were addressed during the recently concluded veto session. And so what we'll do is have three guests. Our first guest is a state representative who is very outspoken and supported the Catholic Conference position and, quite frankly, the position of most rational people. And he spoke out strongly against the repeal of the Parental Notification Act. His name is Representative Chris Bost. He's from the 51st District. He'll jump on here in a second. And after that, what we'll do is we'll talk about the repeal of the conscience rights that is now going to be enacted. The Healthcare Right of Conscience Act was another issue we were very involved with, and that didn't go very well because the legislature basically gutted conscience rights for as it pertains to COVID and COVID vaccines. And then finally, the third part of our show, we'll talk about something that's going on at the national level that's not getting a lot of attention, but we wanted to shed some light on that topic, and that is the problem we're having with religious worker visas. There's a huge backlog on religious worker visas and what's going on in processing those for many of our people that work in our schools and our hospitals and our churches. And so we're going to be joined by David Spicer. He's with the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. He is going to talk to us about that topic at the third portion of the program, which would be, let's see if I can do math in my head, that would be at 8:40. Sorry, we're taping this, so times are a little different. So without further adu, let's bring in our first guest. His name is Representative Chris Bost. He's from the 51st District, which is basically like Lake Zurich area. And well, you know what? Let him describe where he is. Representative Bost, are you with us?
Absolutely. Hey, thanks for having me today.
Hey, thanks for joining us. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I can see you. This is pretty cool. Let's describe your district. I know it's in Lake Zurich, but there's other portions to that legislative district as well.
Yeah, currently the hub of the area is Lake Zurich. We go to Hawthorne Woods, Killdeer, Deer Park, Tower Lakes, Barrington, touch a little bit of Grays Lake, go over into Mundelein, Libertyville, then a little bit of Waukegan. I think on the street of Waukegan, Green Oaks. Trying to remember all of the great little villages that we have that make this up. Long Grove, a little bit of Vernon Hills, So yeah, it's a complex area, but it's an incredible area to get to not only live, but it's a humbled, honored that gets to represent them.
And this is your first year in the legislature, correct? So you're approaching this with fresh eyes and ears. And
yeah, good or bad, however
Right.
you want to think about that.
Right.
I think we've got a great freshman class this year.
You do.
There's a lot of us that are outside of being humbled and honored to be here. We're fired up and we're encouraged and we're excited, and we don't have the baggage bringing into it that
Right.
many who maybe jaded over the years or whatever it may be. We're hopeful and we're fighters, and we want to see the change that we so desperately need actually happen in the state.
It's interesting here listening to you. It gives people perspective of the legislative districts and just how what you have to deal with and the territory you have to cover, and the excitement that you bring to the job. So what before we go into the topic of parental notification, you've had an interesting run because you were elected and then COVID happens, and so we're in this quasi state of meeting. We're not meeting. Well, now I think we're kind of back to meeting, at least a little halfway there.
Yeah.
The committee hearings are still online, so you've had a totally different experience than anybody previous to you in that seat or before. So it's not been the normal progress of events that usually happen.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. Jumping on board, we were down there really quickly to get sworn in, and then went back, doing everything remotely. Went down there to authorize some things to be able to happen more remotely, then went back home and worked, out of the office doing Zoom committees and things like that. So as a freshman, especially, it's really challenging. When a lot of relationships are built and made in person, the hallway conversations, who you're sitting next to on the floor, who you're in committees with on both sides of the aisle, getting to see that you're more than just somebody in a box here on a screen. That you bring different things to the table, and the inability to have those conversations for a newbie was definitely a challenge, but it was great when we got to get down there. On the flip of that, there were some relationships, at least virtually, built so that when we did get into person, it was a quick, well, hey, let's go grab dinner. And
Right.
Let's go grab a coffee. Let's go talk.
Right.
There was something there. You weren't just blindly walking into things either.
Yeah, it was interesting even for us because it was like when you met somebody virtually on Zoom and then you met them in person, you would have to ask the question, well, is it nice to meet you? Did we meet before? It's that awkward sort of pause. So you go through the first session, your first year, a lot of issues with COVID-related things, all the federal money that came in and how to allocate that and that sort of thing. And there was a lot of activity like in May of this year. One of the things that was talked about a lot, I think behind the scenes, not publicly, was about the parental notification law. And so, for various reasons, that legislation was never called during the regular session when we met from, let's say, January through May. It had been looming out there, it had been introduced. A lot of people were concerned about it, talked about it behind the scenes. And so one of the things that I think that's interesting about the whole repeal of parental notification is just how fast it happened. Because if you take a step back and you think about like, boy, was that really fair in terms of a proper amount of public input and dialogue that was given to this very sensitive subject that happened in a really short period of time? So, I mean, why don't we start with like, when did you first hear about this? What were your thoughts when you heard about parental notification? Because you have a bit of a background we'll get into in a second. So as a father, as a discerning person, what was your reaction to repeal of a parental notification on abortion law?
Yeah, we heard that it was a possibility, early on. And it was something that we were preparing for, but it was just kind of looming and floating out there. And so when we got through May and it didn't come up, we're like, all right, cool. They're gonna, they'll try it again next year. There's always a thought they could do it over a veto session, but I was thinking if they didn't try it during regular session, there's a reason why. Right. And, they'll try it next year. Maybe they'll get a little bit more momentum, work on it over the summer, try to build a groundswell on their end to really push this through. But then, that last minute, all of a sudden it popped up in veto and we're like, oh, wow. Okay. Because even the beginning of veto, we didn't think that it was going to be brought up. There was all sorts of debate whether they had the votes to be able to pass it or not. Because as you said, like any discerning person looks at this and goes, I don't understand. I don't understand why we're getting rid of this. And it was a close vote too. It wasn't this overwhelming, push on one side or the other. It was a close vote, and it barely passed.
In terms of background, we've talked about this before, but the law, basically what it says is that prior to an abortion proceeding, if a minor is seeking an abortion and they go into into an abortion facility, that facility has to notify that person's parent or adult guardian at least 48 hours before the procedure taking place. And then there's this other issue that when they wrote the law back in 95, I think it was, 95, that said that, well, if there's situations of abuse or that kind of thing, then the minor can, number one, attest that they've been abused, and then the abortion would proceed. And then secondly, if found necessary, they could seek this judicial bypass where they could plead their case before a judge. And then this situation would go forward. And I think of the 500 some odd cases before an administrative law judge, I think all but one were approved, something like that. So, I mean, this was kind of a solution without a problem, but there's an agenda here. So why don't we just talk about, like, what were your objections to the bill? What were you thinking about it? What was wrong with it in your eyes?
Yeah, there's multiple fronts that made it wrong, right? As you said, it wasn't a parental approval. It was just simply parental notification, letting a loved one know that your minor that you're responsible for is going to have a medical procedure. That in and of itself should have been a no-brainer. But the judicial bypass to be able to allow and help those who are victims is another no-brainer. We're actually helping children. But for me, the biggest red flag, check mark, stand up, and I need to make sure I say something about this because of my background. I was a kids and family pastor for a while, but I've also worked in fighting against this epidemic of sex trafficking across the world. I've worked in India fighting this, and most recently worked here in the Chicagoland area, working for the only safe house in the state of Illinois for minors who were rescued from sex trafficking, some of them being as young as 10 years old. If you didn't know, the average age of entry into sex trafficking is between 12 and 14 here in the U.S. So 13 years old. We're talking about children here. It was one of the things that greatly frustrated me on the other side when they kept talking about women who are seeking this and women who need this. Like, no, these aren't women. These are children. These are children who need support of a loved one, or if they are being victimized by a loved one, need support of a judicial system that can actually do something about it and help these girls get out of those situations. There are children here in Illinois who have been rescued from their traffickers because of parental notification. And the other side said it's just hyperbole. It's not. I've looked her in the eyes. I know her. She didn't want to talk any further. Her family didn't want to talk any further. Obviously, it's an incredibly sensitive issue, but this is a reality. And now we're opening the door, given, the previous bills that have been passed with allowing, anyone and everyone to have an abortion at any point in time throughout their pregnancy, essentially from anywhere in the world, to be able to come here in Illinois, and the taxpayers pay for it. So now we're opening the door for these traffickers and these pimps and those who abuse and exploit children to come to Illinois, cover up their crimes. And hey, while you're here, we got to pay for the trip. So we're going to let somebody else abuse you a little bit more before we take you back to wherever we're going.
You gave one of the more, I think you had, you've been down there long enough to even know, like, there's a lot of debate on the House floor, and when people talk, there's a lot of other conversations going on. But there are also times in debate where everybody's paying attention. No one's looking at their phone. No one's talking to somebody else. No one's trying to figure out what the next, what the bill is, that kind of thing. It was very, in times, intense debate. And when you stood up and made those points about your working at the safe house, and I think you said something along the lines of you have looked into the eyes of a child who's been trafficked. You could hear a pin drop in that room. And, unfortunately, those who are going to vote in the way they did, they had already made that decision. But I think if you could get in front of a jury of your peers, if you will, and if it were a fair debate, I think you would have a different outcome.
Yeah, there were a lot of conversations afterwards too, where people thought, that it wasn't real. Like, I can assure you, this is more real than you'll ever know or experience. Yeah. Sitting across the table, having dinner with some of these children who have been trafficked. It's heartbreaking. And others come up to me later saying that was incredible. It moved me. But unfortunately, we're so ingrained in political spheres, some that they can't look beyond that and can't look to stand up for what's right. Instead, just continue along the same political path.
It's really frustrating being in Illinois right now on this topic because it is so dominated. There's such interests on the other side of this that have so many resources that our side just doesn't have. I do think, though, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Terrence poll that was put out in March that showed that the question was asked, do you support a law where an adult guardian is notified prior to a minor procuring an abortion at an abortion facility? The question reflected the law, and I think 72% of Illinoisans said they agreed with that. It was a straight up yes or no. And so I get that maybe the culture's changing in ways that I wouldn't like and you wouldn't like, but there's no way we're near where this vote reflects. What can people do now that the vote is over? And I think what you said is very interesting, Representative Boss. We live in a state now where you can pretty much, due to the legislation passed a couple of years ago, you can procure an abortion for any stage up to birth. A minor can get one without their parent being notified. And thirdly, I think you said this, but I think it's worth pointing out. And by the way, the taxpayers are going to pay for it now. And you can come from, like you said, anywhere in the world, and we'll pay for it.
Yep.
And we'll send you back on your merry way. Is something wrong here? And we tried, and you tried, and the arguments sort of fell on deaf ears. And I do think there were 7 Democrats that voted no or present, something like that. There's 74. I think the passed with 64. So there were like 9 or 10. And some people, I will say to you, and it's public record, said they were going to vote against it, and they voted for it. It's just very frustrating. And I don't know if you have any words of wisdom for us on what to do or how can we be better. I mean, ultimately it's at the ballot box, but I don't know. Where do we go from here?
I mean, ultimately, it is at the ballot box. You bring up the main point with it. We need to hold our legislators accountable. And outside of the repeal of P&A, when you look at the sex ed bill that passed, and even the repeal of I think you're going to talk about it a little later on today, the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act. When you look at the witness slips, overwhelmingly opposed to passing those, and yet those on the other side ignored and just pushed it through anyways, because the mentality is, I know better than you do. Yeah, I know it's better than you for our community, for our state. That's not our job as representatives. My job is not to push my will out amongst the people. I have certain moral things that when I went door to door and I was talking to people saying, these are moral lines that I will not cross. And if that's an issue for you, don't vote for me. But outside of that, my job is to represent the people of my district, to listen to the voices, as challenging as it is at times, and vote accordingly. There are things that I voted in favor of that I personally would not have voted in favor of, but knowing my district wanted something like that, I voted that way. So we have to hold our representatives accountable. We have to hold our senators accountable, and in a loving as much as possible way. And if they refuse to acknowledge that they're not listening to the people, then, at least on the House side, every 2 years, you've got an opportunity to rally, to work. Yeah, they may have more money, but they can't outwork you if you make that determination of, I'm going to do all I can to make sure that they're held accountable, and we get somebody in there that will actually listen to the people. Get out, knock doors, volunteer, make phone calls. You can do all of those things for a local candidate, and it has a lasting impact. As you said, I mean, the parental notification only passed by a couple of votes. Only a couple of votes. If we had a couple more people willing to stand up and say no on either side, we'd be in a different sitting right now. Same thing with the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act. It only passed by a couple of votes. So if we had, again, representation that was willing to stand up and listen to the people, we would have a different outcome right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I will there was one state rep that was quoted in the paper, in the Tribune, and he said, I've received an overwhelming number of phone calls about this, so I'm going to vote no. And I think he said he hadn't received any on the other side. So I'll give him credit. Representative Walsh from Joliet, he did vote against it because, I mean, this is what his district wanted. I don't know where he is personally. I have no idea, but he did vote accordingly. So so it does work sometimes. It does work. It doesn't always work, unfortunately. And I think what you talked about too is we're going to jump here in a second, but one opportunity. Well, there's two opportunities. One that you said I can't underscore enough is to get more involved in the political process and help people who support your values and oppose people who don't. Absolutely. That's the first thing. The second point is on that comprehensive sex ed bill, there is an opportunity here. I mean, we saw what happened in Virginia and some other places across the country that people are more and more focused on what happens at their local school district and their local school board. And that's something that's going to be coming up at your local school board. And you have the power to stop it. The way that legislation is drafted is you don't have to teach that. You can teach something different. But
it's that or nothing.
It's that or nothing. Right. It's that or nothing. Yeah. And there's ways that you can teach biology and science without getting into that agenda. So there are opportunities out here for people to get more involved, and that's where I think the opportunity is on a political movement in terms of trying to move an agenda. So.
Absolutely. We got to get involved and stay involved. Yeah. I think, the reality is that, I started as just a guy in my community who loved serving my community and found these opportunities and said, well, we need a bigger voice. Mm-hmm. So I got to do something about that. Watching actually the number of people that were involved in local elections and school board elections this last cycle was incredible. I've never seen so many people show up for a school board meeting than I'm seeing right now. People are activated and engaged. And we've got to remember that, yes, there's federal politics, but there's local politics and local matters. And local matters a lot into your day-to-day life. And we've got to stand up and do the right things and fight for the freedoms and the choices that we think are right.
Great. Representative Boss, thanks so much for taking some time this morning. Great work on the parental notification, and I'm sure that there'll be other issues ahead. God bless you and your work. And once again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Great.
Take care. This is Bob Gilligan. Don't go away. We'll be right back. We're going to be joined by Patrick Cacchione. He is the director of the Illinois Catholic Healthcare Association, and he's going to be talking about an issue that Representative Boss touched on, which is the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Have an old bicycle that's not being used? Consider donating it to Catholic Charities Veterans Bike Project of Lake County. Skilled volunteers are refurbishing bicycles to make them safe and ready to be used by veterans to get to and from their new places of work. We also gratefully accept financial contributions that are used to purchase bike helmets and other safety accessories. Our veterans have faithfully served the United States, and now it is our privilege to serve them. For more information on the Veterans Bike Project of Lake County, call 847-782-4219. That's 847-782-4219.
Catholic education offers something other schools don't. When you walk through that door, you are amongst friends.
I can confidently say that I look up to everybody at HT, staff, students. There's just something that you can admire in every person here.
We treat everyone here with the same kind of respect that we would hope that exists in our families. Our curriculum is very rigorous, and we hope to match the academic rigor with our level of academic support.
They help us prepare for college. They talk to us about our future and what we want to do. I think it instills a sense of community, which makes me more confident in my work.
Through the teachers, through our counselors, through all of our administrators, we are educating not just the mind, but also the heart. I think that distinguishes us from other types of schools.
Catholic high schools provide high-quality, faith-based education. The journey begins by taking your entrance exam. Register online at the Catholic high school you wish to attend.
Ancestry and genealogy are more important every day. People all over the world are wanting to learn more about their family heritage for personal and for health reasons. At Catholic Charities, we are hearing from adults who lived for a brief time at St. Vincent's Orphanage, the wonderful, life-affirming agency that operated out of our headquarters for 91 years, serving thousands of women, children, and families until it closed in 1972. Our post-adoption services help adults who want to learn more about their experience at St. Vincent's. Our compassionate staff members provide whatever family background information they can offer, along with support and reunion services. To learn more, call 312-655-7093. That's 312-655-7093. The spirit of St. Vincent's lives on in the inspiring stories that continue to emerge today.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Bob Gilligan of the Catholic Conference of Illinois, and thanks for joining our show here this morning on WNDZ 750 AM. And just as a reminder, you could also watch us on YouTube, which is YouTube, YOUTUBE, in case you didn't know how to spell YouTube.com/CatholicChicago. There you go. You can watch us, listen to us. You can even stop by. No, you're not going to stop by. So let's see. Our next guest with us is Patrick Cacchione. He is the executive director of the Illinois Catholic Healthcare Association. We want to talk a little bit about an issue that Representative Boss touched on briefly, which is the Illinois Healthcare Right of Conscience Act. And unfortunately, it was amended slightly during the recently concluded veto session. And with us to talk about it is Patrick Cacchione. Patrick, you with us? Somewhere?
Hi, Bob. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. It's good to talk with you.
Great. So, Patrick, tell us a little bit about ICHA, the Illinois Catholic Healthcare Association, and what it is that your organization strives to do.
ICHA was started in the early 90s by Cardinal Bernardin. He actually revived it. It represents the bishops, Catholic hospitals, Catholic charities, Catholic long-term care, anything related to Catholic healthcare in the broad sense. It's not just hospitals and illness, but community services, and that's why Catholic charities are part of the association as well. So it brings all the stakeholders around the same table so that we can dialogue and advocate together.
They're telling me that you have to touch a button for the camera. Is that right? I don't know. Whatever. I'm not sure if there's a button or something like that. So ICHA created, it's probably been 20 years ago, to bring together the bishops, healthcare, social services, et cetera, as you were saying. So now let's talk a little bit about the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act. What is it? How it was started? I mean, what is this thing called the Illinois Healthcare Right of Conscience Act?
Well, the purpose of the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act was to protect healthcare providers so that we didn't have to participate or provide services that were objectionable, primarily anything related to abortion services. But if Illinois were to get physician-assisted suicide, it would protect us from providing assisted suicide. So it's a way to protect Catholic providers, doctors, nurses, pharmacists from participating in services that they find objectionable. That was the intent. Unfortunately, recently it's been used to to not get vaccinated, and it's been invoked by police officers, fire, teachers, and asking for their healthcare right of conscience not to participate in vaccination or testing. And that's where it got a little bit sideways recently.
Yeah. It's interesting because I just saw the paper the other day, and I think there was another lawsuit filed by 14, it was teachers, or I think it was teachers, about using the Conscience Act as a justification for not being vaccinated because their employer was asserting some sort of mandate. So this has been going on for a while now. And, here comes now the state, and they want to amend the Conscience Act such that ultimately where they wound up going is to just kind of carve out anything related to COVID from the Conscience Act. So people understand, what's the problem with that? Because you get a lot of people saying, well, hey, those teachers should be vaccinated, and they shouldn't be using the Conscience Act as a justification for not being vaccinated, tested, or masked, or anything. And so, what's the problem with what the state was trying to do?
Well, and this is where our hospitals got into a conundrum here as well. Under the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, if someone invokes that as their conscience objection to anything, the employer has no recourse to transfer the employee, reassign them, fire them. You can't do anything to that employee. And therefore, once they invoke the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, it prevented the employer from doing anything to that employee to accommodate them. You couldn't accommodate them. It was a blanket objection, and the employer has no recourse. Now, at the federal level, there's the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act, and within that act, which is federal, the government has to have a compelling interest and do it in the least restrictive way. Under the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act in Illinois, that does not exist. There's no compelling interest or least restrictive. If someone invokes their right of conscience, that's it. You can't challenge it. And as I said, you can't reassign, let's say, a nurse to a non-physician or non-patient care. And that's really what the problem was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's really one of these issues that brings a lot of different issues to bear. It brings a lot of different, what's the word I'm looking for? Stakeholders and their interest and it kind of comes together. You have the state's interest in trying to make sure that they can keep people safe. You have an individual's right to determine what goes in their body or not. You have an individual's First Amendment rights to determine to what degree that they can invoke something in the First Amendment, which says they have a right of free expression and religious liberty. And how does that clash with the state's interest in keep people safe and employers' responsibility to provide a safe working environment? So you have a lot of things going on here. And it was interesting in the debate to see how people played those different things. Because I think ultimately what happened is that you had, to use a boxing analogy, you had in one corner, if you will, the blue corner, saying that, the state can determine anything and you have no basic right, you have no conscience rights when it comes to this. Sorry, you're out of luck. And then you had, on the other extreme, you had people saying that, well, we just don't believe that you can do anything to me because I have a conscience right and leave me alone. And I'm myself autonomous individual. And so I'm not going to do anything because I'm just invoking conscience right because I don't think I want to do anything. And then I think what happened was you had people in the middle trying to come up with arguments to say, look, you can satisfy both of these things, but nobody wanted to listen to that. Everybody wanted to just kind of do their own thing. I know ICHA was kind of trying to reach out, as the Catholic Conference was, to say, look, There's a court process. You can go through it. That takes a little bit more time, but it will be adjudicated appropriately if we can wait for that to happen. And you could make ways to expedite that. And then you could also, I think we were trying to throw fig leaves out there and say, well, there's no conscience right against the vaccine, but maybe there is one. Maybe there is a conscience right when it comes to vaccination, but not necessarily for masking and testing. And if somebody's masked and tested, isn't that good enough? The nuances of this were just kind of lost real fast, and it was unfortunate.
You're absolutely right, Bob. And as you said, it's very complicated, and we're not going to escape a judicial review.
Right.
This is going to go to the courts at the federal level. It's going to go to the courts at the state level. So it's going to be adjudicated somehow because it is complicated. And for hospitals, it was extremely complicated because we had doctors, nurses that were saying we're not going to get vaccinated and we're not going to get tested. And yet we couldn't, in our good conscience, put them into a patient's room where they're compromised. So the individual had a conscience, but so did the hospital has a conscience not to jeopardize their patients by putting an unvaccinated caregiver into that room. But again, under the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act, once they invoked that, we had no recourse to remedy that. Now, as you said, we did argue that testing was not invasive. It wasn't like a colonoscopy. It was a simple nasal test, and they refused to get that. So we made that argument. We made the argument that we do drug testing for employees. We require surgeons to wear masks during surgery. I mean, we do these things to protect patients, and but the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act did not allow for that. So that left us with a dilemma. We want to protect our patients, but we don't want to change the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act and amend it,
right,
and set up a precedent where in the future it can be amended again and prevent us from or require us to participate in things that we find objectionable. So we didn't think this was the answer to reforming the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act. Wasn't the answer to solving this problem. As you said, we felt much more comfortable if we just took it through the legal process, the courts, which it's going to go through anyway.
Yeah. That was the point the bishops are trying to make, is that they did not want to amend the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act. It was a bad precedent. You can amend it during times of COVID. Well, what's the next reason? What's the next vaccine that could come up with against a variant that may be morally objectionable? Because now people have no protection if the next vaccine is made from morally objectionable sources. So that was, I think, where we were coming from. We were trying to also get the state where it had to go in terms of, as you said, making sure that people are in safe environments, yet not abrogate and nullify the Conscience Act. So here we are, November. There's really no conscience rights under this bill that passed as it relates to COVID. They have carved it out for that reason. What happens now? I mean, the way the bill works is that it's not effective till June. And then there's rumors of the legislature coming back in January and making an immediate effective date. Whether they do that or not, we don't know. So, but are you concerned at all about the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act going forward, or should we be comforted in knowing that this is just kind of one time, never happen again?
No, I am concerned moving forward. And the reason is, if you listen to the debate, there was a lot of language from the legislators saying that the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act is too broad. We like the fact that it's broad because it covers us completely. But making the argument that it's too broad and changing it, for, as you said, for COVID in this instance, what worries us is if they use this concept of it's too broad and then they want to tighten it or restrict it in some fashion. That's what worries us. We like the fact that it's broad and we have that broad protection. We do think it was misused from its original intent, but at the same time, once you amend it for this crisis, what's the next crisis we have adversaries with Planned Parenthood and ACLU who may determine that, there's a need to amend it because it's too broad for other reasons. And, we've set a precedent and we think it's very dangerous.
Representative Bostock touched on this, and I'll just mention it briefly. I don't know if you want to say anything, but I've been down there since 1998. I have never seen a bill to receive more opposition than this one. These numbers are thrown all over the place, but I think there were 55,000 witness slips filed in opposition to repealing the Conscience Act. That touches on more than just the Conscience Act. That has to do with the whole anti-masking, anti-vaccine, whatever. But 55,000 people to sign on a bill that was introduced, in a matter of days, is that there's something there that I think they've touched on a nerve, and we'll see where that takes us. I don't know.
Well, Bob, this was a veto session, and they needed a supermajority, which they could not get. That's why they put the effective date to June 1, because then that puts it into the next legislative year, which then they needed a simple majority. There's a lot of opposition to this, and that's why it's going to go to the courts, and we'll see what the courts decide.
Yeah, very good. Patrick, thanks for taking some time this morning to join us. Now we have your lovely picture up on the screen, so that will suffice. Thanks for taking some time this morning. That's Patrick Cascione from the Yale Illinois Catholic Healthcare Association. This is Bob Gilligan. Don't go away. We're right back. David Spicer is going to join us. He's going to talk about a problem we've been having recently with religious workers and their visas or lack thereof. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Catholic Charities Veterans Employment Services help veterans find and maintain employment through job readiness training, resume writing assistance, mock interviews, and job placement counseling. We work with a wide array of employers and community partners to help veterans reach their career goals. We owe a debt of gratitude to all of our veterans for the sacrifices they made to serve our nation. It is our privilege now to assist them. To learn more about Catholic Charities Veterans Employment Program in Cook County, call 773-808-2954. In Lake County, call 847-782-4219. You can also learn more at CatholicCharities.net. To all United States veterans, thank you for your service.
I am a seminarian.
The Church needs compassionate and well-trained priests to help guide each of us through life.
What inspires me, what draws me always to the priesthood is continue to see priests be a beacon of hope for other people.
You can play a part in the education of these young men as they prepare for a life of service to others.
I want to be that beacon of hope too, and it sets my heart on fire.
To support our seminarians, make your gift at archchicago.org/seminarian fund or call 312-534-7959.
Catholic Charities in Lake County provides a comprehensive range of social services supporting individuals, families, and older adults. These include crisis assistance, shelter, clothing, family support, counseling, legal assistance, primary health care, and specialized services for seniors and veterans. Grab-and-go meals and food pantries help those who are experiencing food insecurity. Plus, we have a diaper depot to support low-income families and their infants. If we can assist you or someone you know, please call Catholic Charities of Lake County at 847-782-4000. That's 847-782-4000.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Bob Gilligan of the Catholic Conference of Illinois, and thanks for joining us this morning for this show on WNDZ, 750 AM. And once again, you can follow us on YouTube, which is it's not W, it's youtube.com/CatholicChicago. I'll figure that out sooner or later. All right, next topic on the agenda for us today is to talk with David Spicer. He is with the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. I think his title is Policy Advisor or whatever that means, but he's going to talk to us a little bit about what's going on with the religious visas and religious workers. David, are you with us? There he is.
Hey, Bob. I'm here.
Hi, David. Thanks for joining us this morning and taking some time to explain this issue. So why don't we just open it up? What is going on with religious workers and their inability to either come to the United States or if they leave the United States to come back? It seems like we've got a bit of a problem on our hands.
Absolutely. I'll give a brief overview of the program for those who aren't familiar with it to start. So the religious worker visa program is divided into two different categories. There's the special immigrant category, and then there's the R1 non-immigrant category. And essentially this just means that the special immigrants are coming to immigrate permanently to the United States, and the R1 religious worker program is for those who are coming temporarily to the United States. And in both of these cases, it could be ministers or non-ministers. Of course, in the Catholic context, a minister would be a member of the clergy, and non-ministers would be everyone else. So women and men religious who aren't ordained, as well as lay persons who are coming as missionaries or other employees within the church. And for both of these programs, over the past 2 years, we've seen a significant delay in the processing of the paperwork that's needed for these religious workers to come to the United States. And that, of course, has very significant impacts on the ministries of the church in the United States, whether they're based in parishes or Catholic charities or other organizations that the church has in the country to serve local communities. So the delays to sort of go through what's happening. In some cases, for the religious workers who are already here, they're applying to have their immigrant status renewed so that they can remain in the United States. And if they are unable to secure that renewal prior to a certain deadline, they then have to leave the United States and return to their countries of origin. And then once they're there, given the ongoing implications of the pandemic and this continued delay in processing, of course, it's unknown how long it'll be before they're able to return to the United States and continue their ministries here. For those who are not yet in the United States and are seeking to come to work for any sort of capacity within the church, some of them are unable to even get the sort of the visa that's necessary to do that in the first place. And this has implications, like I said, for a number of different ministries, including parishes not having priests, or in some cases nursing facilities or Catholic charities or other institutions not having the workers that they need to carry out the ministries that they do.
It's interesting, being involved with this. Like I never realized. I don't want to use the word rely because that's probably too strong a word. But there's a significant number of religious workers in the United States that are helping out our ministries right now in the United States. Do you have any context that? Because I think here in Chicago we find I think there was a principal, teachers, as you indicated, nurses. So they are really helping out do our basic ministry.
Absolutely, and many people think, even within the government, I'll say that the reason that we are so eager to solve these issues with the processing of religious worker visas and other immigration benefits that are relied upon by religious workers is because we have a shortage of clergy. And as we've discussed, it's not just clergy who are using these, lay persons as well are using these religious worker visas. And it's not only for the provision of mass or other liturgical activities. It's also things like you said, like Catholic education, and of course outreach to those in need. And given how diverse we are as a church, it's also in response to the populations, Catholic or otherwise, here in the United States, who might not be from this country. So in the Archdiocese of Chicago, for example, as you know, there are large numbers of Polish immigrants, large numbers of Italians and others who require ministers and religious workers that are knowledgeable about their different cultural practices, as well as the languages that they speak. And the church, for a very long time in this country, has been a great mechanism for integration. So when we have large numbers of immigrants coming to any particular place in the country, the church, especially through its religious workers, whether they're clergy or otherwise, are able to help those immigrants integrate into our society and to be able to do that successfully, which they might otherwise not be able to do, especially if the workers that we have aren't really able to communicate with them or aren't understanding of maybe where they're coming from and sort of the cultural differences that exist.
It was just last night. I was at my son's school, and we ran into a teacher there who this is not a religious worker. It was an HB1 visa, and he was telling the story. And I said to him, I said, "Oh, you're the guy," because when we were there in when school started, he wasn't there yet. There was somebody who was a friend of ours who was substituting for him until he came here. And I didn't know who this person was. I had no idea. But I just met him last night. And the reason he wasn't there when school started was because he had a delay in now that's HB1 visa, which is different than what we're talking about. But he said it just took forever. He got the job offer in January to start school in September, and it took over 10 months. So he just got there. He had just arrived. And so it took 10 months by the time he was able to get just for a 3-year visa. So my question is so it's just not religious workers. It seems like it's others as well. Why is there such a backlog? Is it all due to COVID, or is it more than that, or what's going on? There's a reason, and we can't. What's your take on it?
Right. It is certainly part of a much broader problem that exists with U.S. immigration system, and I will say that U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is the federal agency that is charged with the responsibility of processing applications for those seeking to come to the United States and other immigration benefits, has been significantly under-resourced. So for a very long time, USCIS, as it's known, has not received direct funding from the federal government. Instead, it relied on the fees that are paid by immigrants and sponsors, whether they're employers or otherwise, of immigrants. And given that limited availability of resources, that constrains their ability to hire staff, it constrains their ability to improve their systems. And so when you have that combined with the significant impact of COVID and the fact that it has caused, certain issues in terms of getting interviews completed and other requirements within the immigration process, it's really created sort of this problem where we have, as you said, delays that we haven't ever seen. And I'll give one example that is significant, and that's employment authorization for those who are already here. And they've gone through the process, they've done everything that they need to do. And even in the case of priests, for example, even those who take vows of poverty and aren't necessarily getting paid for the work that they do, they're still considered under federal law as employees for immigration purposes. And so they can be here, they can be authorized to be here, but they still have to acquire that employment authorization, which is an additional step. It used to take about 2 months to get that employment authorization, and now it can take as long as 10 months to a year. And of course, that's problematic because then those priests are unable to engage in the ministry that they're here to do. And it's the same with all sorts of workers, not only religious workers, but others as well.
Just as a note, so people understand, people hear the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, they hear USCCB in various contexts, but just so everybody understands, this is the kind of work they do. This is not like, probably it's not going to be on the front pages of any newspaper, but so this is who we turn to when we have problems here at the local level, because it affects not only here in Chicago, it's all the state, it's all over the country. We're not the only people going through this. It was maybe a little bit more pronounced here, but nevertheless, so these USCCB, and this is what they do sort of behind the scenes to work with the federal bureaucracy, the federal agencies and Congress to see what we can do to get things going. And David and other people that we deal with at USCCB have been very helpful in trying to, push, pull, tug. I don't know however you can do it just to try to move this along a little bit faster than it's happening, although it's still not happening fast enough for anybody. Where do we go from here, David? You optimistic? You pessimistic? Where gaze into your crystal ball and tell us this problem's going to be over, or tell us what's going to happen next.
I wish I could tell you, certainly there.
And I only ask you that because everybody asks me these questions. So now I'm turning it on you because I always get the same kind of questions. Wish I could tell you I knew, but here's what I know. So go ahead.
No, it's certainly a fair thing to ask. And I wish I could tell you that, within the next week or two, we would have all of this solved. We have been working on it, of course, over the past year and even longer than that, especially since the pandemic has had the impact that it has on immigration. I will say that as of Monday, as many of those listening or watching might be aware, the federal government has rolled back some of the COVID-19 travel restrictions that were in place. And this was also contributing to the inability of religious workers to come to the United States if they are from certain countries, the majority of countries, I should say, in the world. They were unable to come unless they qualified for an exemption. And unfortunately, religious workers did not qualify for those exemptions. So now that those restrictions have been lifted as of this past Monday, that will address some of the issues for those who are abroad and seeking to come to the United States. The problems will continue to persist as far as the processing that USCIS does, because those impact those who are already here as well as those who are seeking to come. So I can say that we have been fairly successful in terms of our engagement with the federal government. USCIS just had a new director confirmed in August. So it's only been a couple of months that she's been able to be in that position and sort of work to improve the processing that the agency does. We're also in contact with the White House and the State Department, which has a role in this. And I will say that this is not just a Catholic issue, Bob. So we have worked with religious denominations sort of across the spectrum, not only fellow Christians, but also Muslims, Jewish partners, and others, to really bring to light sort of the issues that these delays are having and the implications they have on local communities. Just in August, after the new director of the CIS was confirmed by the Senate, we sent a letter to her, and we were joined by, I think, 17 fellow national religious organizations, again, representing denominations across the spectrum. And this just shows, again, that it's not a Catholic issue, and it is very much the case that different religious organizations are depending on these workers for the work that they're doing. And especially when it comes to things like social services, which we know that we know religious organizations to be to play a very important role in.
David, thanks so much. They're telling me we got to run. We got to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining us. God bless your work, and we'll continue on, hopefully, with brighter prospects ahead. This is Bob Gilligan of the Catholic Conference of Illinois. Thanks for joining and listening and watching our program. Have a good day. Have a good week.
Join us every Monday through Friday at this time for Catholic Chicago. You can stream our programs live or listen to past programs by visiting our website, archchicago.org, and clicking on Radio TV. And please connect with Catholic Chicago on social media.